This is not a typical interview with questions about movies and other things. This is an interview about something deeper. So subscribe, like, and go to the interview. Gentlemen, tonight isn't about your films. It's about you, the men behind the roles. So tell me, what does happiness mean to you? And Al, his face weathered yet soft, his eyes carrying the weight of years, leaned back, fingers steepled, and said, Happiness. It's when you don't have to perform, when the mask comes off and you're just you, sitting in the quiet after the chaos. His voice low, almost confessional, while De Niro, shoulders squared, jaw tight, shot back. That's poetic, Al, but happiness isn't sitting still. It's action. It's work. It's wrestling the chaos and coming out on top. His tone sharp, almost challenging, and Clara's lips curled into a knowing smile as the air crackled with their opposing truths. The audience already sensing this wasn't just a conversation, but a duel of philosophies forged in the fires of wildly different lives. The room seemed to shrink as Clara steered deeper, her questions slicing like a blade. And what about meaning? What gives your life purpose now after all you've seen? And Pacino, his gaze drifting somewhere distant, murmured, Maybe it's in the gaps, the moments you didn't script, the choices you can't take back. I don't know. Maybe we're just chasing shadows of roles we've played. His words heavy with a quiet regret that hung in the air, unanswered, until De Niro leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, voice low and edged with irritation. Come on, Al. Life's not a damn movie. You don't get to edit it, you take the hit and keep moving. That's the deal. And the tension spiked. Not just a disagreement, but something deeper. A fault line between two men who'd walked parallel paths, yet never quite understood each other's strides. Clara, sensing the fracture, pressed harder. You both talk about life, but are you living it? Or are you still playing parts even now? And the question landed like a grenade, silencing the room as Pacino's fingers twitched against the armrest and De Niro's jaw clenched, his eyes flicking to Al's, not with anger but with something unspoken. A shared history neither had ever aired publicly, a hint of old wounds or rivalries bubbling beneath their polished exteriors, and the audience leaned in, hooked, sensing that whatever came next would peel back layers these men had guarded for decades, a glimpse into something real and raw, something that might unravel them both if Clara kept pushing, and she would, because this was only the beginning, a spark that promised a fire. You both spoke of chaos and silence, struggle and peace, but let me ask, when was the last time you felt truly alive? Not as actors, not as icons, but as ordinary men. Clara Voss's voice cut through the heavy air, her eyes locked on Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, who sat exposed under the studio's dim lights. Pacino, his gaze still drifting somewhere in the haze of memory, froze, his eyes growing heavy as if peering through the studio walls into a distant past. He spoke slowly, cautiously, each word seeming to carry a quiet pain. There was this one evening. I was younger, maybe in my 30s, sitting in a small New York bar. Nothing fancy, just a beer and dim lights. There was a girl there, not an actress, not from our world. She was just laughing, so genuinely that for a moment I forgot who I was, forgot the roles, the cameras, everything. It was alive, real. But I left. Because I always leave. Because there's always another role, another scene. His voice trembled, and a hush fell over the studio. The audience, especially those over 60, felt their own lost moments, those unlived fragments of life, stir in his words. De Niro, still rigid in his seat, suddenly looked away, his fingers gripping the armrest tightly. He muttered, almost reluctantly, You've always been like that, Al, chasing those fleeting moments. But what do you do when they're gone? I remember losing my best friend because I was too caught up in work shooting another film. When I found out he was gone, I just kept going, because what else was there? There was no anger in his voice, only a deep, weathered exhaustion that resonated with everyone in the room, or watching at home who had ever chosen ambition over the people who mattered. Clara, sensing the emotional scales tipping, pressed further. You talk about loss, about choices, but don't you think you've both sacrificed too much to become who you are? Pacino's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't joyful. It was bitter, almost sardonic. Sacrificed? Maybe we just sold ourselves, Clara, sold ourselves for applause, for recognition. But you know what's funny? I'm still not sure if it was worth it. His words hit like thunder, carrying a truth that every soul in the audience recognized. The years spent chasing something intangible. De Niro, unexpectedly, nodded, his eyes flashing as he added, "You're right, Al. We paid a price, but I never regretted it, because if you stop, if you think too long, you start to see that everything you fought for might just be empty." It was the first thing he said without his usual armor, and the audience felt their hearts tighten, seeing not just an actor, but a man who, perhaps for the first time, admitted his victories might not have been as sweet as they seemed. The tension climbed, and Clara, sensing they were on the edge, went all in. If you could turn back time, choose differently, what would you change? Pacino, instead of answering, stood abruptly, his hands trembling. He walked to the edge of the stage, as if trying to escape the question, the cameras, himself. In a quiet voice, he said, "I'd have stayed in that bar, Clara. I'd have stayed and asked her name." The longing in his voice stilled the room. De Niro, watching him, stood too, his face darkening. "And I'd have called him, Al. I'd have called him while there was still time." Their eyes met, not as rivals, not as actors, but as two men seeing their own regrets mirrored in each other. The studio erupted in a silence so profound that every person in the audience felt their own missed opportunities, unspoken words, and unmade choices come alive in that moment. Clara, realizing she'd touched something that could break them both, paused, her eyes glistening but steady, knowing this wasn't the end, only the moment when their masks cracked. What would happen when they fell completely? No one knew. But the audience, breathless, waited, because this story was worth staying for. The silence lingered, heavy and electric, as Clara Voss sensed the pivotal moment, when destruction or elevation hung in the balance. She chose the latter, her voice soft but resolute. "Robert, Al, you've just shared something most people keep buried their whole lives. But tell me, is there still a chance for you to find what you've lost?" Pacino, still standing at the stage's edge, turned slowly, his eyes, damp with memory, glinting as he spoke, his voice hoarse but laced with quiet hope. "You know, Clara, I thought time took it all, that those moments, like that night in the bar, were gone forever. But maybe the point isn't to take them back, it's to learn to see the new ones. I looked at the people here tonight, in this room, and saw their eyes, their stories. Maybe I can still stop, listen, stay." His words, simple yet raw, struck the audience, especially those over 65, who knew the ache of looking back at lost chances. His voice offered a flicker of hope that it wasn't too late. De Niro, standing now, lowered his head, his fingers loosening on the armrest. He spoke slowly, as if tasting each word. "I always thought you had to keep moving, never stop, never look back. But listening to you, Al, I realized I might have been running in the wrong direction. I lost a friend, missed moments with family, but maybe I can still call those who are left, say what I didn't." There was no edge in his voice, only a vulnerability that made the audience catch their breath, seeing not the De Niro of the screen, but a man admitting his strength had also been his weakness. Clara, sensing they'd reached a depth no one expected, asked her final question, her voice a near whisper. "What would you say to each other if this were your last conversation?" Pacino turned to De Niro, looking him in the eye, his face softening. "Robert, I've always admired you, your strength, your will. But today, I saw you're not just fighting, you're searching, like me. I'm grateful we talked, because you reminded me I can still be better." De Niro's eyes widened briefly, caught off guard, then he nodded, his voice unsteady. "Al, you've always been the soul. I thought you were just dreaming, but you showed me dreaming isn't weakness, it's courage. I'm grateful, because you made me wonder if I've missed something important." They shook hands, not as actors or rivals, but as two men finding common ground in their differences. The audience erupted in applause. Not loud, but warm, heartfelt, because everyone felt they'd witnessed not just a show, but a moment when two lives shifted, even slightly. Clara stood, her eyes shining and closed. "This isn't the end, gentlemen, it's a beginning. For you, for all of us. Think about what it means to be alive, and don't be afraid to pause to feel it. As the cameras pulled back, Pacino and De Niro stood side by side, their gazes calm but lit with a new spark. The audience, especially those over 65, felt their hearts beat stronger, because this story didn't end. It left the door open for new beginnings, new conversations, new chances. Now, a question for you, viewer. What is the meaning of life for you? Write in the comments, I will be interested to read.